Adoption is ultimately an opportunity to give to a child in need, to be selfless and sacrificial, to help nurture and guide a young adolescent into their future. Basically, there's people out there who would take advantage of the opportunity of adoption to misuse a child and take them in and put them in purposely negligible or emotionally detrimental situations. These types of people are awful, belligerent, and that's why we have both checks and insurances in place to ensure that children go to safe and whole homes. We have to make sure parents are emotionally and financially sound enough to raise a child, to be responsible enough. And as such, there will be some legal gray areas and gray areas of the decision between different agencies across the nation, as ultimately agencies are allowed to give the final say in whether a parent is actually capable of being a parent or not. Now, some legal issues that may arise is that of discrimination laws. In fact, in many states, adoption agencies, are allowed to purposely discriminate against LGBTQ individuals. They have, by religious tolerance, the ability to state that we don't want this person to be a parent because they're gay or queer or trans in any sort of mention of the way. And basically, this is just blatantly discrimination. It's has zero backings, and it ultimately hurts the child because they don't have an opportunity to grow up in a household. But the fact that this is a legal issue and that agencies are allowed to legally declare that they don't want a child to be adopted by this person because they are gay just goes to show why it needs to be abolished. In fact, here in Oklahoma, as of here in the state we live in, there was recently an Oklahoma Senate bill passed called 1140. It was in May of 2018, in which basically it stated that agencies were allowed to legally discriminate against gay people and of certain minority classes. This is as of the adoption choices Oklahoma has switched from them. Basically, there's different situations arising in which other states too, like South Carolina, they gotten national attention because they had gotten high up legislative in the government to legally give them financial provision, even though they had been discriminatory in the past. They basically allowed government-funded agencies to legally discriminate in South Carolina. So between all these situations, you can clearly see that there might be a swing between state to state, and the fact that agencies at the whim can just declare this in several states is just awful. It's appalling. So basically, the claims that they make is that gay parents and trans parents are unfit to be parents in three different ways. They're allowed to legally state that they are incapable because they don't provide a good mental upbringing, that they'll mentally stunt the growth. They'll purposely, or they'll negatively affect them even if they did properly grow. They'll still have underlying mental issues, or they ultimately will decide that being gay itself would be a reason to stop adoptive parents from taking a child, as they fear the child themselves might grow up to be gay, which is it's just a problem in its own anyway. So what ultimately makes a good parent a parent is their ability to provide for their child. Same-sex or trans parents have the same ability to provide for their children as their heterosexual and cisgender counterparts. Basically, the first claim that these types of institutions say is that non-traditional parents cannot give a good mental upbringing, that they will be mentally stunted to children. And that is blatantly wrong. In fact, as of a backing by the American Psychological Association, they state that in their article that research continues to suggest that children of sexual minority parents, though exposed to unique experience, perform and develop at similar rate as children of heterosexual parents. Further on, in another source, as of by a quote by Dr. Peter C.J., an expert in the field of child development, as in the Pediatric Journal, American Academy of Pediatrics, he states that the first review of available data regarding the well-known of children living with gay or lesbian parents concluded that While research on these topics is relatively new, there is no evidence that the development of children with lesbian and gay parents is compromised, and in any significant respect, relative to that among children of heterosexual parents in otherwise comparable circumstances. So basically, in both of these sources, they're basically saying that mental upbringing is perfectly sound. These parents do provide a stable environment for these children to grow in. In fact, but the fact that agencies can legally declare that they do not allow this because they will mentally stunt the child is just apparent. It's unfounded. As another study by Professor Abby E. Goldberg, in her own study, she did a detailed study of lesbian and gay parents and an open relationship. She basically sought to how they would develop their child and tested to see how their relationships between child and parent would grow and develop over time. She put a lot of research into it, and she found that there was no significant effect on mental growth, that children seem to develop just as equally as their heterosexual parent counterparts, both academically and emotionally speaking. So a second claim that institutions can claim would be a reason that gay parents and trans parents can be parents is that they will, even if they give them a proper mental upbringing, will give them mental issues, regardless of the fact that they are brought up correctly. This is something on top of, it kind of ties into their mental upbringing. They basically state that they will make them get confused with what is proper with family relations. And there's so much underlying hate underneath their discriminatory thoughts. It's a huge mess. Anyway, by backing of Ellen C. Paris of the Committee of Psychological Aspects of Child and Family Health, he states that another early review summarized 23 articles published per 2000 that together describe 615 offspring, that being children of lesbian parents and gay fathers, and 387 controls, that of heterosexual parents, were compared together using a variety of psychological tests and interviews. The conclusion drawn from these studies was that children raised with gay and lesbian parents did not statistically differ from other children in emotional and behavioral functioning. They purposely sought out to see if there had been any underlying emotional issues, that being eating disorders or any sort of other underlying mental issue that might arise. They declared that they were equally as likely as a heterosexual couple for the child to develop further psychological effects, not relating to the parents at all, just in general. So that claim is absolutely false and it's just discriminatory as well. And basically the last claim was that, and this one is just pure just hate in general, is that they believe same-sex couples will influence the child to be gay as well or have gender dysphoria later on in life. So, basically the American Psychological Association had to state this over two studies done by Friedman Taker and D. Sedgley in 2002. They say as such questions regarding child's adjustments, in particular gender role development, gender identity, and future sexual orientation, have been voiced in the debates of the suitability of LGBTQ people as parents. On the contrary, research has consistently failed to cover any empirical justification for these concerns. Basically, they're stating that their children would be just as likely as any heterosexual family to have straight or gay children or gender minority children. As such, whenever on the lines of specifically gender dysphoria, they state that concerns are of no importance because they're just as likely as any other. Just driving home that point that they're basically equal and the same, that they will still turn out as likely as any other straight or heterosexual family to have gender dysphoria. Um, Ultimately, at the end of the day, this law allows discrimination. As such, it ultimately hurts the child because the child is basically not given the opportunity to have a childhood, a normal childhood. Um, as of the study I mentioned earlier by Abby Goldberg, she had seen that 32%. Oops, sorry. Okay, so basically, they lose out on the opportunity of a childhood, that they would lose out on financial stability. In that study by Abby Goldberg, she had stated that 32.2% held a college degree, 27 or 30% held a master's degree, 15% had an associate degree or some college experience, while 13.3% held a PhD, a medical degree, and an education degree, as well as that only 6.7%, only 6 individuals just held a high school diploma. So most of these parents were in fact financially sound. In fact, the average income was $140,000 per year, for each of these individual parents. So they would be financially sound. They'd miss out on that financial opportunity. They'd also miss out on emotional needs. As of Ellen C. Paris of the Committee of Psychological Aspects of Child and Family Health, he states when marriage of their parents is not a viable option, children should not be deprived of opportunity for temporary foster care adoption by single parents or couples of a differing sexual orientation. Public policy and community supports are vital to the success of children in any circumstances. He basically goes on to double down and state that children will miss out on the ability to have any sort of emotional support, and that they would lack that proper feeling of home, and they want to have connected with parents at a young age. And then basically, overall, children deserve the right to have a family, as well as that gay parents and trans parents have the right to pursue a family if they're fit. But the fact that these discriminatory laws are still in place blatantly go against what presumed rights they should have. So, the overall conclusion, it hurts the child at most. And if we can't all agree on what is sound for religious reasons or ideological reasons, we need to understand that the child's best interest is at heart, and that denying themselves or denying them a home, a place to live, is ultimately the worst you can do for them. Thank you.